everybody, this is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing one of my fancy BookTube hats, and while I am filming this in advance, because I will be traveling, if you are watching this, it means I have officially been on BookTube for 10 entire years. I uploaded my first video to this channel on January 3rd, 2016. January 3rd is also my actual real-world birthday, but this is not a landmark birthday for me this year. The 10-year anniversary of the BookTube channel is much more exciting. And to celebrate this monumentous occasion, I wanted to do a video looking back on the last 10 years of reading. And at first I thought I was gonna do like a 10 best books of my first 10 years of BookTube, but that was just way too hard to narrow down that list. So what I've ended up with is a 10 favorite or most formative authors that I have discovered since I've been on BookTube. These are authors I have read for the first time since starting my channel back at the beginning of 2016, and that I now feel that reading their work has been formative for me as a reader in some way. The number of books these authors have published varies wildly. The number of books of theirs that I have read versus how many of them I have not yet read also varies widely. Some of these authors I discovered because of BookTube. Some of them I think I would have still found on my own. And why these authors' books have stood out to me and what they represent for me in my journey as both a reader and a booktuber is pretty varied. So I'm hoping this will be the type of list that'll be able to prompt some interesting discussions in addition to just being, I hope, a really good, solid recommendation list of some great SFF authors that I have discovered in the past 10 years. These are in no particular order, and when I say that, I mean it. I took the order they were in, decided I didn't like it for the flow of the video, and just like shuffled it up. The first author on this list is Nghi Vo. I have read 6 books by Nghi Vo, the first of which was The Empress of Salt and Fortune, which I read in 2021. This is the first book in the Singing Hills cycle, an ongoing series of novellas about a traveling cleric in an Asian-inspired fantasy world whose job involves collecting and recording stories and histories. These books, I have read 5 of them so far, and they appeal to me in a very specific way. They check a lot of my boxes in terms of things that are books about stories and storytelling, books about the telling of history and how we remember it and who gets to tell it. But they've all been 4-star reads for me, and the book that I finally read at the beginning of this year that made Nghi Vo one of my favorite authors was The City in Glass. This book is so weird and so spectacular. It's about a demon who has been nurturing this city for generations when it is destroyed by angels. It is told somewhat non-linearly. It is so beautifully written. And now I really want to read more of Nghi Vo's other stuff that's not just the Singing Hills cycle. The next author on this list is one that I absolutely started reading because of BookTube, and that is Martha Wells. I picked up All Systems Red because everyone was talking about it. This is not a book I think I would have gravitated towards without a community pushing me to pick it up and read it. I think I read this first book in 2018, which was the year after it was published. And then the next 3 books were all released shortly after I had read the first one, so that was great timing for me. Now I can say I have read a total of 16 books by Martha Wells. That is the 7 books that currently exist in the Murderbot Diaries series, the 7 books of the Books of the Raksura series, and then the 2 books that exist so far in the Rising World series, Witch King and Queen Demon. Martha Wells is one of the authors I find most compulsively readable. All three of these series that I've read from her are a little different from each other, each have a bit of a different feel. She writes fast-paced action in a way that I find I don't mind. I often find books that have a lot of fast-paced action to be off-putting or boring in some way, and I don't find that with Wells's writing. And her characters are just so great. She doesn't shove things about her characters in your face. You do sometimes have to read between the lines a bit. That's something I've especially come to appreciate on rereads of her books. Next is Rachel Hartman, an author who has published 5 YA novels, all in the same universe, all of which I have now read. I have a review on this channel, like a multi-series review video where I discuss all of the books in the Southland series that existed prior to the publication of Among Ghosts this year. So that's Seraphina, Shadowscale, Tess of the Road, and In the Serpent's Wake. I will link that. I started in the wrong place with Rachel Hartman's writing. I started with Tess of the Road, which is like the start of a sequel series to the first 2 books. But that is a book where even though I started in the wrong place, it blew me away. It is, I believe, one of the best, if not the best, YA fantasy novel I have ever read. I have reread it. I reread it after going back and reading Seraphina and Shadowscale. It is so layered, so heartfelt, so emotional. It has such a beautifully flawed protagonist who learns so much. And all of her other books are good too. I will keep reading anything she publishes in hopes that one day she will publish another book that is as good as Tess of the Road. Because that is one of those books that sets a standard for what I look for in YA fantasy. Like, that is the bar, and it's a very high bar. Another YA author whose new releases I'm actually no longer following and reading, but whose books were very formative for me in the earlier years I was on BookTube, is Anna Marie McLemore. The first of their books that I read was When the Moon Was Ours, which I read like end of December, beginning of January 2016-17. And for a while there, they were consistently publishing these absolutely beautiful, fairy tale-ish, magical realism standalone novels. Their last few books have been just not in that genre niche that I was so interested in. But I have read 7 of their books now. The one that I still own and want to read but haven't read yet is Dark and Deepest Red. The ones that I particularly loved and gave 5 stars were When the Moon Was Ours, Wild Beauty, and Blanca y Roja. I haven't reread any of them. I don't know if they still hold up. I would love to know if there are other YA authors who are kind of writing in this style now. If there are, I think they're flying under my radar. The next one is a doozy. This is T. Kingfisher, aka Ursula Vernon, and if you count everything she's published under both of her names, including like the kids' books, I've read 22 of her books, and there's still so many I haven't read. That's a lot. If you are unfamiliar with her earlier work, sort of before she blew up in popularity online, particularly if you're unaware that she has published work under her real name, Ursula Vernon, I want to point you towards, it's here, you can't see it, it's under such a huge stack of books. I have the big chunky bind-up edition of her webcomic Digger. I think Digger won her first Hugo Award in 2012. I read it in 2016. I gave it 4 stars. And that was the start of my Ursula Vernon journey. I think you can still read the whole thing for free online. You don't have to get it in print. In fact, I don't think it's available in print anywhere anymore. But it is on the interwebs and you can read it. It is about a anthropomorphic wombat character named Digger, who's a very practical wombat and ends up on this portal fantasy quest adventure. That said, it took me a really long time to read something of hers that I actually felt was a 5-star read for me, a full 5-star read, and that was Nettle and Bone. Nettle and Bone is so far my only 5-star T. Kingfisher book. I don't think it will stay that way forever. I think there will be other books from her that I love this much. Most of the time, though, she's like a reliable 3 or 4-star author for me. But she is one of those authors who is so reliable, so readable, and she has such a distinctive point of view and voice as an author. You can really tell when you are reading a T. Kingfisher book. And I feel like most of my favorite authors have a really strong point of view like that. Next on the list is Becky Chambers. I believe I've read all 7 of her published books. That's 4 of the Wayfarers novels, 2 of the Monk and Robot novellas, and the 1 standalone novella, To Be Taught If Fortunate, which was my least favorite. Both the Wayfarers books and the Monk and Robot books, you can tell they're by the same author. They have a lot of the same feel, but they are different enough for me to really feel like, yes, this is an author who has, in the years since she's been publishing, really gotten something right twice with 2 totally different series. I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet in 2016. That was the year after I think it was traditionally published, after having been initially self-published. Those were my early days of BookTube. It was a book everyone was talking about, and I have continued to read everything Becky Chambers has published since. The Monk and Robot novellas, I think, are... The first one came out like right before the whole cozy SFF thing became a big trend, and I think was one of the formative books that led to cozy SFF being such a thing that it has been in the past few years. I see a lot of people describe the earlier Wayfarers books as cozy science fiction, and I can't quite subscribe to that. I think they are cozy adjacent, but each of them has some heavier, more serious subject matter that makes me personally not comfortable recommending them in that particular way. I gave all of those books 4 stars though, and my favorites, somewhat controversially, were A Closed and Common Orbit and The Galaxy and the Ground Within. This is a series I want to reread someday. I am so looking forward to the day that I decide to set aside the time and just sink back into this world. Now, Becky Chambers is an author I've actually never given a 5-star rating to, but if she keeps writing like this, it's gonna happen someday. Next is another science fiction author whose work I think has generally been very influential in the field of science fiction in these past 10 years. Also someone I haven't actually had a 5-star read from yet, but it's probably only a matter of time, and that is Leckie. I've got some of her books stacked up behind me here. I was late to the party on Leckie. I didn't read Ancillary Justice in 2022 because I have this feeling in my mind, in my head, in my heart that I don't like military science fiction. This first book in the Imperial Ratch trilogy is so very good and so very interesting on so many different levels, and the second 2 books in that original trilogy aren't quite as good. But then the 2 spin-off novels, Provenance and Translation State, are both very different. They're their own types of story in this same universe, and I really enjoyed both of them. And no, I still haven't read The Raven Tower. This is continuing to be hilarious because I truly thought The Raven Tower was going to be the first Leckie book I ever read, because I didn't like military science fiction, and The Raven Tower is a Shakespeare retelling. And I still have not read The Raven Tower. Someone else whose work has been really important in the SFF genre in the past decade is N.K. Jemisin. I have given one book of hers 5 stars, and it's not the one everyone else gives 5 stars. I rated the first 2 books in the Broken Earth trilogy 4 stars, and then I gave 5 stars to The Stone Sky. That's not how anyone else feels about these books, I'm aware. I thought it was a great conclusion to that trilogy. N.K. Jemisin is an author who excitingly has a lot of backlist titles that I haven't gotten to yet that are still waiting for me to discover. I have read the first books in 2 of her other series. I've read The 100,000 Kingdoms, and I have read The City We Became. I own the next books in both of those series. I just need to find the time to read them. Stylistically, like way on the other end of the spectrum from N.K. Jemisin in terms of fantasy writing, but also a hugely influential fantasy writer, and especially influential on me as a reader, is Susanna Clarke. Susanna Clarke only has 2 published novels, 4 published books total if you count The Ladies of Grace Adieu and The Wood at Midwinter. I have read both novels. I've read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I've read Piranesi. I've read The Wood at Midwinter, and I am holding on to my copy of The Ladies of Grace Adieu for a rainy day. That is one of my break glass in case of emergency books. But Susanna Clarke just has to be one of the most stunningly unique fantasy writers of our day and age. I don't care if she's not prolific. I do not care. Everything she writes is a masterpiece. When people ask me what my favorite book of all time is, the one I go to as my answer is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I have my copy here. I do mean to reread it sometime in the not too distant future and see if that is still the case. I just have so many fond memories of like slowly over a course of several months making my way through Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell and having the fantasy of manners of it and the fae fantasy of it and the alt history of it and the way it builds so slowly and so spectacularly. I just had such a great experience with it the first time I read it. That was in 2017, and I feel like that is a whole reread project that I would love to tackle. And then my last author on this list is Silvia Moreno-Garcia, who has published books that cover quite a range of genre and subgenres. I only read her speculative fiction books, SFFH, science fiction, fantasy, horror. I don't read her like noir or historical books that aren't speculative, but she is an author who, even when I'm reading something from her that is a little outside my comfort zone, I feel really safe in her hands as an author. I feel like whatever she is doing, I am here for it, I am sat, I am ready to see where she takes me. If you are wondering which book of hers is the most like fancy hat lady reads-esque, the most Kelsey-ish book of hers is Gods of Jade and Shadow. And then second place would be The Beautiful One. So if you are someone whose tastes tend to align with mine and you're wondering where to start with Silvia Moreno-Garcia, that is what I would suggest. Again, she's another author that I technically haven't given anything 5 stars. It doesn't really matter though, because she is so consistently good. And it is really exciting to me that she is so consistently good over such a range of different styles and like subgenres. I think the first book of hers I read was The Beautiful Ones in 2017, which was her fantasy of manners. And then the book of hers I've read most recently is actually one of her older books that was published before that, back in 2016, I think, and that's Certain Dark Things, which is like a gritty, dark, urban fantasy vampire novel that's an intense, brutal book, but also so good. If you are looking for an intense, brutal vampire novel. I read that like right after the election last year, when I was like not in a mood for anything that was going to like hold my hand and tell me it was going to be all right, because that was not how I was feeling. Anyways, Silvia Moreno-Garcia is a good writer. Anyways, that was it. That was my 10 favorite, formative, foundational authors that I have discovered in these wonderful 10 years. If you have been with me for any amount of that time, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your overwhelmingly positive comments. Even when I don't reply to them, I do read them. Anyways, I hope you are having a very nice day. That is all. Bye for now.